A compact winter storm moves through the Great Basin area, quiet conditions in the central U.S., and warm, showery weather moves into the northeastern states. There's the surface map for this afternoon, and many of you are probably looking at the lows, the highs, and the fronts, but forecasters also like looking at the air masses. And what we have here, the most dynamic air mass in the northwestern U.S., driving this strong cold front, and you can see the winds up to 30 knots there at Salt Lake City. A transitional air mass through the Four Corners area, temperatures near 60 and dew points about 20, very typical for this time of year. An outgoing polar air mass across Texas, a fresh incursion of cold air into the Great Lakes region, driving this series of fronts into the northeastern U.S., and also we've got a tropical air mass across much of the East Coast region. Temperatures up to 70 in New York City and even up there in Quebec. Now, with a front coming out of the western U.S., we always have to be on guard for the possibility of severe weather in the south central and southeastern U.S. And very important for that is the return phase of the moisture. As we can see here, we've still got offshore flow. So that's not conducive to moisture return, especially with that front so close. So there's only a narrow window of opportunity to get that moisture northward, and we're not doing so good. Dew points only around 40 in South Texas. So this may be slightly on the dry side by the time it gets into Texas. So that may not rule out precipitation, but it does dampen the prospects for severe weather. And then taking a look up in the Pacific region and Alaska, strong warm air advection across much of the Pacific coast, and we can see quite a bit of rain in that area. Further north, drier, cooler air across Alaska and Yukon, but temperatures have come down quite a bit in the northern Canadian region, starting to see below zero temperatures up there around Victoria Island. So this is about the coldest air that we've seen so far this fall. Most of that cold air feeding into the Hudson Bay region. Doesn't look like that's going to come south immediately. And dropping back south, there's that Canadian system linked up with that push of cold air through the Great Lakes. Some impressive weather in Utah this afternoon. This was just a few hours ago. You can see the winds are out of the south, temperatures around 50. Then as we progress through the afternoon, thunderstorms there at Ogden, and you can see the winds coming around to the northwest becoming quite gusty there at Salt Lake City International with rain showers throughout the area. At this time, the winds have subsided, but they are looking for the possibility of lake effect snows off of the Great Salt Lake, and that's a pretty rare occurrence. There's just enough heat on the lakes, and with that northwesterly flow, cold air coming in the mid-levels, that could produce some bands of showers, snow showers, later on this afternoon. And there it is. You can see it on the TAF. Rain showers changing over to snow showers around 2200 Z, which is going to be about 4 p.m. That'll last for a couple of hours, then that should start clearing out overnight. And there it is on the satellite Salt Lake City in this area here. The northwesterly flow sweeping back in behind, and you can see those convective clouds due to that strong modification of the cold air mass moving out over warmer terrain, very cold in the mid-levels, and that gives you some very steep lapse rates, and that helps to produce these convective clouds, rain and snow showers embedded in those. Some of the stations in the Snake River Valley reporting rain showers, but if you drill down a little bit, some of them are getting snow. And it's a very favorable environment for the production of cold air. With all that dry air, dew points in the 20s at the surface, that allows for wet bulbing. You get that precip into the air mass, evaporation takes place, and the air cools, especially around these showers that you see here precipitating into the air mass. Taking a look at the mid-tropospheric conditions, we do see an active pattern there in the Gulf of Alaska, negative P&A pattern, and strongly zonal flow through the Gulf of Alaska and adjacent Pacific region with a strong jet max approaching the British Columbia coast. So no wonder they've got all that rain there in Western Canada. And that's also a favorable pattern for an atmospheric river as well. Throughout the rest of the continent, we can see some troughing there in Utah associated with that weather system moving through that region, and another trough in New York and Pennsylvania. And of course, ridging. There is going to be ridging in between the troughs, one up there in the Maritimes, a flat one through the Great Plains associated with the fair weather in that region, and there's the other ridge, and that's going to be associated with the strong warm air advection ahead of that Pacific system. Going forward in time, we will notice that since this jet is on the leading side of that trough, we're not expecting that to dig very much, and running that forward, you can see it doesn't really do that. It stays pretty much north of Portland and Seattle. And let's see, going through the rest of the sequence into Saturday and Sunday, zonal across southern Canada, another cutoff low down there in Texas, producing some more precipitation and cloudy weather. And then going into next week, some vague troughing across the lower Mississippi River Valley, very broad troughing off the west coast, so continued stormy in that region. And towards the end of next week, some significant digging of this next trough. And you can see the strong southwesterly flow across the Rockies, so this could be some interesting weather coming up in about a week. Why don't we take a quick look at that environment there in Utah? Now, out ahead of that front, which is kind of in this area here, you can see that there is mild weather. Winds are out of the south, and even a little bit of slightly disorganized cumulus. Doesn't look all patchy like that stuff further up to the northwest. That's well-grown cumulonimbus up there. It's going to be shallow cumulonimbus, but enough to produce a bit of thunderstorm activity up there in the Snake River Valley. Now, if we drop the isobars on here, well, the map is getting cluttered, so let me just get rid of the satellite picture. Well, there's the isotherms. It's still kind of hard to read, but I see lots of 20s and 30s, and as we go southwest, we can pick up those 50s. But like I said, it's still a little bit hard to read. There you go. I think we've got a cleaner look at what's happening. But we do see that low pressure area there in northeastern Utah, the cold front with the series of falling isotherms, and I'm looking at potential temperature here, not the actual surface temperature, so this is kind of corrected to a common level, and that's going to be the isotherm gradient, and we get gradually into the cooler air up to the northwest. And also the pressure gradient. There it is, sea level pressure shown by the dark lines, so that's going to be your cold advection coming in through central Utah. So this is what it looks like on the sea level pressure and thickness, and you're looking at an actual sea level pressure and thickness chart. This is not like those TV graphics that you often see on the internet. And this is what forecasters use, stuff like this. Now, starting out, don't see much in the Pacific Northwest. You can pick out a little bit of troughing, low pressure in eastern Washington. And the thickness gradient is kind of broad, north and south through the Rockies. So the system we have in Utah came together rather quickly. Let's bring this forward. And you can see that by afternoon, this is going to be about noon. It comes together rapidly there in Utah. So by now, the frontal zone moving through Nevada into Utah, warm front kind of like that, and the warm sector out there in the Four Corners area, and cool air across the Snake River Valley. Let's bring that forward into the overnight hours, and tomorrow you can see that precip field coming together in the Rockies. The cold front continues to advance into Colorado overnight, and by dawn, already entering New Mexico in eastern Colorado. So just to clue you in on where the fronts are, it's going to be about like that. Definitely northerly flow in Las Vegas, Flagstaff, Gallup, and out ahead of it, southerly flow. Okay, so that front will be coming into the southern plains for tomorrow. Let's see what happens during the day. Pretty good cold pocket there across Albuquerque around tomorrow afternoon. The front continuing to advance towards the West Texas area, making it into Amarillo, Lubbock, and breaking out precip in that area. So we are going to see conditions start to go downhill in this part of the country. Not much going on elsewhere. 1035 millibar high across the Great Lakes, continuing to feed cold air south throughout the eastern U.S., and on the other side, Pacific air mass moving into the Four Corners area and the Rockies. So obviously all the action is going to be there in Texas. Going forward through Friday into Saturday, we see that frontal zone moving into Abilene, Lawton, San Angelo, breaking out lots of precip. Again, the moisture quantity is going to be marginal. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of severe weather, but just not looking at like high tornado risk or anything like that. An inverted trough setup there in Texas. Let me just pan that south a little bit. And by inverted trough, we mean that the low pressure is down to the south, high pressure to the north, and just kind of this vague trough extending northward through the Interstate 35 area. Rain coming down tomorrow evening there in the East Texas area, or actually Friday evening, getting ahead of myself. And that whole system continues moving to the east. Another cold pocket across Arkansas and Missouri for Saturday. And that's about as far as that chart sequence goes. We'll take a look at that on Friday to see what's going to happen later next week. But for now, looks like a lot of fair weather in the western U.S. Well, let's take a look at our temperature extremes. Nothing today, although it was quite warm up there in Vermont and upstate New York. Thursday, nothing. Friday, well, 4 degrees there in the San Luis Valley. And that's where you saw that drone footage last week out there near Alamosa, expecting 4 degrees on Friday morning. No records indicated for Saturday. Nothing for Sunday. Nothing for Halloween. Nothing for November 1st either. So we're just kind of in a transitional period, mild weather, precipitation in parts of Texas and the Gulf Coast area, and just counting down the days until we get into some serious winter weather. Anyway, thanks for stopping by and watching Forecast Lab. We'll be back here again on Friday for another edition. Have a good one, and we'll see you in a couple of days. Bye-bye.